What's up, friends? I'm Becca Moore. I am a romance author. I currently have 2 published books out. I'm a crafty person and just kind of overall purveyor of chaos. I have always been a really active reader, and for my first YouTube video, I decided that I'm going to dive right in and give you my mid-year book check-in. And for this check-in, I'm going to be using the mid-year freak out book tag questions, which I've included in the description below. All right, the first question on this list is my favorite read that I've done so far in 2023, and that would be The Nanny by Lana Ferguson. I believe this book was Lana's debut book. It's about a former cam girl who finds herself in a situation where she is now the nanny for an executive chef for his daughter. And that executive chef just happens to have been one of her biggest fans in her past career, but neither one of them knows it. It was emotional, it was fast paced, it was steamy. It was really fantastic. I loved it, and I looked up to see what other books she has coming out, and she has another one coming out later this year. For best sequel that I've read so far this year, that would be Ruger's Pearl by Carlotta Hugh. This is technically the first book in her Orc Match series, but she released a full-length prequel novel, I think it was last year. It was either really early this year or sometime last year. And I, ever since reading that one, had been anxiously waiting this sequel, like refreshing the page, anxiously waiting. And it did not disappoint. So orcs are not typically my jam, but Carlotta weaves such an amazing story with the amount of world building that I keep wanting more of that. And next up is a new release that I haven't read yet, but want to, and that is Love Theoretically by Ali Hazelwood. So I actually have a physical copy of this somewhere, but I really enjoyed the Love Hypothesis and then her 3 STEM novellas, but I haven't dived into her newest one yet. I am a little scared. She's one of those authors that I have enjoyed her, but not quite to the hype level that a lot of people have, and so I'm very concerned that I won't like it. So I have not dived into it quite yet. My most anticipated release for the second half of the year would have to be Knockout by Sarah MacLean. I am a huge fan of Sarah's and regularly listen to her podcast and have read, if I haven't read all of her past books, I am probably only missing 1 or 2. So I am pretty much a huge historical romance fan. Most of my all-time favorite books are historicals, and this series by Sarah is no different. I believe, or this is the 3rd one in this series, and I believe it's the last one. There might be one more, but I have been really enjoying it throughout. So one of my biggest disappointment, I hate the word disappointment. My biggest disappointment read that I've done so far this year, unfortunately, would have to be Legends and Lattes by Travis Baldree. And the book was great. The book was fine. I think I just bought into the hype a little bit too much, which I don't typically do. I tend to avoid hyped up books just because I'm always afraid that I'm not going to like them as much as everybody else. And I wanted to love this book, and I did like it, but not as much as I was expecting to. Now, I still recommend this, but it just wasn't right for me at this time. I might reread it or read the sequel when it comes out, I think later this year or next year. I might give it a little bit of time and try it again. The biggest surprise book that I've had so far this year is actually one that I just read, and that was Beyond the Fame by Settlemyre. Now, I don't know why I'm always so timid and intimidated about reading books about fictional novels about famous people or rock star romances, and I don't know why, because I typically like them. So I listened to this one and damn, it was hot. The dual narration was everything. The narrators of this book were just, they were perfect and fully embodied the kind of the characters that I was envisioning in my head. And especially Settle has done a great job with her like this book and then the previous one in the series with having specific photo shoots for kind of representations of the actual characters on the cover, which I really liked. For my favorite new author, new to me author, that would be Kate Claiborne, and I just read her newest book, Georgie All Along, and somehow I've missed all of her previous releases, and I don't even know why, but I finally picked this one up on audio from the library, and I absolutely loved it. Like, I loved the relationship between the two main characters. I loved just the growth that Georgie had throughout the entire book. It was really focused on her growth and her development. If I remember correctly, it was only told from her point of view, and that tends to be something where you get obviously more growth from the primary point of view character. My newest fictional crush is sort of a tie between Jake, Caleb, and Mars from Pucking Around by Emily Rath. Now, I picked this book up around the time of the Stanley Cup. Like, I was in an airport, a hockey game was on, and I was like, I am clearly in a hockey mood. I need a hockey romance. So I just kind of went to Amazon and was like, hockey romance, and this is what popped up, and it looked familiar. So I thought it sounded good. I picked it up. I completely missed that it was a why choose romance, which is totally fine. Like, not something that I avoid. I really enjoy those, but I didn't know this. And so I was probably a quarter of the way through before I realized it wasn't a love triangle. And when I realized that it was not a love triangle situation, it became even better to me. So as I raced through all 700 plus pages of this book, I felt myself just crushing equally on all of these guys and their relationship with the main character. They were all so caring and romantic, and just like the relationships were just so good in this book. So they're kind of my new fictional crushes, but in general, I don't do crushes that much, but I just really enjoyed them. My newest favorite character that I have encountered this last 6 months was definitely Kat from The Bride Goes Rogue by Joanna Shupe. I always love a Shupe heroine, and this one was no different. It was a pleasure to watch Kat say kind of like F it to expectations and live the life that she wanted to live, after some family situation stuff basically just like left her without a fiance and without kind of like that next step in life. So Joanna Shupe is always a joy, and her historical romances, especially the ones set in the Gilded Age, are just love them. A book that made me cry is a little unexpected. It was not a fiction book. It was Share Your Stuff, I'll Go First by Laura Tremaine. Now, I read this book before I ever listened. She has a podcast, and I picked this book up because one of my friends had kind of recommended it, or had recommended her podcast, and somehow, I ended up reading this. And so this is a nonfiction self-help memoir type thing. And so every single chapter was set up through a thought-provoking question that then dives into stories and anecdotes from the author. And the purpose of the questions are supposed to help you take your friendships to that next level. So basically thinking about some of these questions and the answers to some of these questions was really what made me cry. So I made myself cry. So In a very similar vein, the book that made me, I'm gonna say, the happiest this year, or just like self-reflective happy, was Buy Yourself the Fucking Lilies by Tara Schuster. Apparently self-help memoir stories were a big hit for me in this first 6 months of the year. And I think if I remember correctly, I actually read these two books kind of back to back. So in my brain, they were very similar. But this book also made me tear up, but it made me so happy. And it was emotional and funny. And it looked at kind of those small things that you can do to I'm using fix in quotations here, like fix your life. Just bringing you small joys, small things can make a big difference, starting with buying yourself the freaking flowers. The most beautiful book cover that I have encountered this year would be Fly With Me by Andy Burke. And this cover just makes me so happy. I enjoyed the book, but the cover is really why I picked it up. I know, don't judge a book by its cover and all, but the cover, this was an ARC that I got, and I believe it comes out in September. It also captured my heart because it has a couple of scenes, very towards the beginning, that take place at Disney World and at a Run Disney event, and both of those hold a huge place in my heart and just have impacted my life. So I immediately loved the cover and then immediately connected with the book because of those things. In the second half of the year, I really want to read more graphic novels and manga. It's a genre. It's a genre type of style of books that I have really enjoyed in previously, and so far this year I haven't read a lot, which kind of makes me sad. But I also now have a subscription to Manta Comics, so I've been reading a lot of my comics on that app versus in a physical book or in an ebook. All of that being said, as of today, according to my story graph, I have read 37 books so far this year, which accounts for 10,510 pages, with 78% of my reading being fiction, 22% being nonfiction, and then 25 of those books were romance, which doesn't really surprise me. And then over 50% of my books have been either from the library or through my Kindle Unlimited subscription. That's my year in books so far. Any books I've missed that I should make sure to read in the second half of the year, leave your suggestions in the comments below. And thanks for joining me and my reading chaos. See you next time.